My vocal. There we go. You guys are probably going, I can't hear you. I forgot to unmute my microphone. How about that? Part of the problem is we don't have two screens anymore, which I'll get to in a second. I know, I hear you. I know, I hear you. So I'll just put that in the chat. It's coming. Sorry about that. So I was just saying, thanks so much for joining me 6 weeks in a row on the live stream. This is great. We got 20 people here so far. We haven't even started yet. It's 7:01. This may be the best turnout we've had yet. We'll have to see. I want to thank so much. Let's see. You guys should be hearing the audio any second. Once you guys hear the audio, let me know that you're hearing the audio and everything. Okay, it's good now. Hey, Randall, how's it going on? So we've done 6 weeks in a row. This week, we're going to pick up where we left off last week. We're going to talk a little bit more about some compression and EQ and some different things that you guys can think about to add to your workflow. I've had a really busy week. We did a lot of makeover in the studio, repainted the whole place a different color, which is kind of weird. I redid the whole studio and painting and whatnot the week after, let me just mute, let's get this down. The week after I did a studio tour. So now it looks a little bit different. I might shoot some other footage and throw it up on YouTube. And I also got the new iMac Pro. We're using that for the first time tonight. So hopefully everything goes well. And one of the reasons why I didn't realize my microphone was muted is because before I had two screens. I had a big screen up on the wall, which I don't have anymore, and my monitor, and I can see all the different windows. Right now, I'm just dealing with the iMac Pro and thinking about a way to add a second monitor, because the way my desk is set up, if I put two screens side by side, it blocks my speakers, and I can't have that. So I'm dealing with a MacBook Pro for the chat room and all that other stuff, and I'm working maybe with an iPad, so we'll see how everything goes. So let's check out the chat and let's see what's going on, and we'll bring the chat up here on the screen. Again, I can't even see OBS, so let me just bring this up and make sure it switches. Okay, we got a chat room ready to rock and roll. All right, let me bring this window down so you guys don't have to look at my face here. Let's see who is here. 21 people here. This is fantastic. I'll start at the top and scroll my way down here. So here we go. So we got Randall. Randall, what's up, buddy? How are you? We have Mark is here. Hey, Mark, how's it going? Yes, it should be Saturday, not Friday. My head's all screwed up. It's been a crazy week. Sorry about that. The date's right, but the day is wrong. My apologies. John is here. Hey, John. Thanks for doing these. No problem, John. Thanks for joining me. I appreciate you guys coming out. David SJ is here again. Hey, David, how are you? Let's see. You guys will get the audio now. Yeah, you guys will get that. MJ Smith is here from Yorkshire, UK. Very cool. I don't know what time it is there, but it's probably late. Alberto's here. Hey, Alberto, what's going on? James is here. Hey, James, welcome back. I think you were. Don't think you were around last week. I think you were off last week. Andy is here as well from Aussie, probably Australia. Wonderful, awesome. 24 people here. This is really, really cool. So as I said, we got the new iMac Pro in the mix here, and I will tell you, if you've seen my video on the channel about the purchase of the iMac Pro about a month ago, it finally came in. I did a complete clean install, meaning I didn't use a backup drive in the Mac world. It's called the Time Machine, where you can just load whatever's on your old computer into your new computer, so you don't have to start from scratch. I didn't do that this time. I started from absolute scratch and loaded up all my applications, all of my plugins, and it took about a week to get all that done. And there were some issues with some plugins I had to work out, but I got everything working. I wanted to have a super clean install. So I will say, man, compared to my 2013 Mac Pro, the speed difference is unbelievable, especially working in video. And the display, the screen that I'm looking at, the 20s, it's a 5K, 27-inch 5K display, is better than any display I've ever owned. Really, really nice, really, really sharp. You get great resolution and you can see things really well. I really like it. So far, so good. And I've recorded a few things for learningtomix.com already video-wise, and it just cranks through that video. So I'm really happy with it. But the only downside is that I don't currently have a second screen where I can move windows around and those kinds of things. So I have to deal with that. But we're getting there. So hopefully everything is going to look and sound okay for you guys tonight. So we'll see. Let's see who else is here. New Mixer. Hey, New Mixer. This must be your first time here. I don't recognize the name. If it is, let us know that. And if anyone else, if this is your first time here, thanks so much for joining me on the channel. This is our 6th or 7th week in a row where we've done this live stream. And every week I'm trying to do a new show around mixing and plugins and stuff. And we're kind of picking up from last week. So if you haven't seen any of the previous live streams over the last 5 or 6 weeks, and the song that we're going to be looking at tonight, if you have an opportunity to mix the song yourself, get all the audio files and the first 4 videos from that series where we mix the song from start to finish, you can go to homerecordingmadeeasy.com. You can pick that up as a course, and right now it's 50% off. And I think this is the last weekend we put it on for 50% off. You're going to use the coupon code, write this down, LMS Live Mixing Series 50, and that gives you 50% off the course. Go check it out if you want to check that out. We also have, and I'll bring back this shot here for a second. You'll also see scrolling across the bottom of your screen this weekend. Again, we have mixing with analog style plugins made easy. That course is also on sale with a coupon code, which you will see scroll across the bottom of your screen if you're not looking at it already. I know there's a slight delay here on YouTube. Let me just check that out. Yes, 20% off mixing with analog style plugins made easy. Why? Because over the last 6 or 7 weeks, we've been talking about all these analog style plugins. Just use the coupon code MAPME20. You can see it going across the bottom of your screen. That will give you 20% off. And before we jump into Studio One, and I'll answer some questions for everyone here, if you like what you see and you're getting a lot out of these live streams and you find these weekly shows informative and also valuable to you, feel free to use the super chat and feel free to leave a tip. It allows me to help me do this for you at no charge each and every week. So that would be great as well. 26 people here. Let's see who else just jumped in. We have Ryan here. Hey, Ryan, what's going on? Ryan says, finished compression made easy today and just got started with mastering made easy. Had to pause to watch this just in time. Thanks for the training. Man, thank you so much for buying the courses. I hope that they're helping you. Let me know what you think of Mastering Made Easy once you've had a chance to go through it all. That's awesome, man. Thanks for purchasing that. I know you'll really like it. Best song backing tracks. Hi, all. You might be a first timer here too. If you are, let me know that. MG Smith says, my first time. Hi, everyone. MG, thanks so much for joining. I'm glad this is your first time. If anyone here is here for the first time, once again, make sure if you haven't done so already, head on over to homerecordingmadeeasy.com. Right on the homepage, I'll give you 5 free training courses, absolutely free, worth about $110. If you don't have that, go over to homerecordingmadeeasy.com. Get yourself signed up. Doesn't cost you anything, and you'll be part of the ecosystem, which is homerecordingmadeeasy.com, which means that every week I'm sending out coupon codes and discounts for all my courses just for you guys for being on my VIP email list. And don't worry, your email is safe with me. I don't sell your email addresses. No one has those email addresses, so you don't have to worry about anything like that. Let's see. Evan Ward, the code is LMS50. Yes, so if someone must have been asking about the coupon codes, yes, LMS50, and there's no space between the S and the 5. It's all one word there. That will give you 50% off the live mixing series that we've been doing on the live stream for the first 4 or 5 weeks. I think there's 4 videos in there. It's like 6 hours worth of training, 50% off this weekend. And also, you're correct, MAPME20. Again, no space between the numbers and the letters, right? All one word. That will give you 20% off mixing with analog style plugins made easy. Robert Boots here. Hello. Hey, Johnny Lipsham's here. What's up, my brother? Hey, what's up, brother? How are you, my friend? Haven't seen you in a while. Glad you're here. Make sure you check out Johnny Lipsham's channel as well. He does a live stream, I think, every Sunday night. Right, Johnny? Go and post it in the chat. Feel free to do that. Davis is here. Hey, Davis, what's up? Evan is here. What up, HRME? Hey, what up, Evan? So we got 33 people. Hey, if we hit 40 people, we're actually going to break the record. So this is great. Every week we're getting a better turnout. And that was the one thing I was concerned about when starting a weekly show, is that nobody was going to show up after about the second week. It's gotten better every single week, and that's awesome. And that means I'm going to continue to do these for you. And I got a bunch of ideas. Okay, so have no fear. And we're going to be doing that. So let's try to, and we're going to do questions and answers. Don't you worry. Let's pull up Studio One here. And I want to make sure you guys can see and hear Studio One, because once again, this is the first time with all the new gear here that we're doing this. Okay, you should see Studio One. And you should see me as well. Let me know that you can see Stduio One on the screen before we jump into this. I'll get my headphones on and get myself ready to rock and roll. And we'll jump into this, okay? We're going to continue. So now, again, this song that we're going to be doing, working on tonight, is the same song from the live mixing series, okay? Nothing's changed. It's a continuation of what we've been doing over the last several weeks. Let me get my cans on. All right, now I can hear myself. Wonderful. So let me know that you guys can see and hear all of that, okay? And before we jump in, so let me go and let me just play back a little bit of this section of music so you guys know what we're dealing with. If this is your first time here, and I know we have a few first timers here. So here's the song. This song is by the band Fruition, and the name of the track is Santa Fe. Cool track. We mixed this entire song from absolute beginning to end, and that is the live mixing series I keep mentioning. Here is part of that song. Let me know in the chat that you can hear and see Stduio One on the screen. Here we go. Okay, how's the audio there? I can see some people saying they can see it, they can hear it. Wonderful. I don't know how loud it is. I've just turned up the the gain a little bit. I want to make sure I don't blow you guys out. You say, it's a couple of you saying crank it up a little. Yeah. Okay, hold on. Let me do that for you. Here we go.
We're gonna move someday. We're gonna move to Santa Fe. To Santa Fe.
How's that? A little bit louder, a couple dB more on the master fader there. Hopefully that helps. Let me know. Let me know. And so, okay. Let me know in the chat if that's okay, and we'll just jump into this. I'll try to keep my eye on it. And again, we'll do some Q&A afterwards. Don't you worry. We're going to be here as long as it takes. So we have 39 people here, man. You guys are freaking awesome. I love you guys. Okay. So, well, let's make these small here. Brand new, fresh install of Stduio One. Installed perfectly. Everything worked perfectly. Third-party plugins, not so much. We could talk about that later. Anyway. Okay. Evening All Rock is here. Evan. Oh, yeah. Okay, cool. Everything's better. Stduio One. Nice. Everything good there on the audio? Okay, much better. James says, thanks, James, brother. Appreciate it. Okay. Okay, cool. If it's good, we're good. Okay, so as a little bit of a recap for folks that weren't here through the whole set of videos that we did. So we primarily mixed this song, as I keep saying, from start to finish. And we focus mostly on, in the first few weeks, we focus mostly around the Plugin Alliance SSL channel strip, the SSL 4000G. Okay, that was kind of the main feature of the mix, where we spent most of our time just working with that. And now those are in the first 4 videos, which is part of the live mixing series volume 1 that you can get 50% off this weekend. Okay. So we take you through the whole plugin. We tried to get the mix as good as we could just with that. Okay. And then after that, the next set of videos that we did that are still on YouTube, we went ahead and we added last week some tape emulation and some console emulation to hear what the difference would be if you just added that in after the fact. Okay, and we went through that last week and we talked about how they can add a little bit more vibe and a little bit more, flavor, if you will, to this analog mix that we're working on. Okay, to complement the channel strip. Okay, now this week, and then we did reverbs and delays and we did all of that. Again, you can go watch those videos. Okay, now this session here is a fairly small session. It's only got 14 tracks in it. Okay, in brown, we have all our drums, basic kick, snare, top and bottom, couple of toms, overheads, and a chamber. Microphone, we have a bass DI, we have a couple of guitars, a keyboard, a lead vocal in yellow, and 2 background vocals, okay? And then we, excuse me, we bust everything over to our busing system down here. Again, drum bus, bass bus, guitar bus, keyboard bus, vocal bus, background vocal bus. Down here in blue, we have some effects. We had a drum reverb that we put all our instruments in a few weeks back, and then we have some delays and a few reverbs for our vocals here. Again, we talked about that in the live mixing series. Down here in purple, we talked about parallel compression and how we use parallel compression to add some more, again, a little more punch, a little more depth, a little more vibe to the mix. Okay, we did that as well, okay? And so that's where we are now. So now that we've kind of done all of that, and we said, okay, we got a pretty good mix going here. So what I want to focus on this week is another kind of a concept or a technique you can think about. Now, again, this really is where these third-party plugins really become, I wouldn't say necessary is maybe not the, well, necessary if you want to use these kinds of techniques. They aren't necessary, you have to have them. But helpful is probably a better word. Again, we've been focusing a lot on third-party plugins. Now, as I said, we focused most of our mixing around this channel strip, which has compression and EQ in it. And that did all the heavy lifting. It's the only compressor in EQ that we use on any one of the singular tracks throughout this mix. On our drum bus, we added an additional compressor here, the Slate Digital FG Gray. Okay, and then on the master bus, we added the SSL's, our Solid State Logic Native SSL bus compressor. Outside of that, all the individual tracks are just being done with the channel strip. So, and it sounds great. There's nothing wrong with that. But one thing you can consider, and one thing that I like to do in a lot of my mixes, especially with client mixes, and another way for you to make your mix sound unique, have a little bit of a special sound or flavor to it, is to add selective, in selective tracks, some additional EQ and or compressors. Okay, let me explain what that means. So visualize this if you can for a second, like we're mixing in an old, no, I shouldn't say an old, in a commercial studio where we have a large SSL desk, right? We have the big console, right? The SSL in front of us, right? All, you know, however many it is, 40 faders or whatever we're working with, and we're only got 14, but you know, we have a big desk. Okay, and we've got everything dialed in on the desk. But then also in that studio, and most big commercial studios, you're going to have racks of outboard gear. Now, every studio is going to be a little different, but even a smaller studio, commercial studio, or even a lot of home studios, a lot of you guys even have some outboard gear, and I do as well. But in our studio, we may have a couple of, 1176s or one 1176 compressor. We might have an LA2A. If we're lucky, we may have a Fairchild, but most studios don't have that unless you're a big time studio, because that, an original Fairchild's, 40 grand. But we may have a couple of Pultec EQs. We may have some other pieces of gear that you'll see engineers patching it out to certain tracks. Okay. Now, why do you do that? You do that because, as we've been talking about for the last 5 or 6 weeks, and as I talk about a lot with these particular plugins, and I keep bringing this up, so I should probably leave it on the screen. And as I talk about at great length in mixing with analog style plugins made easy, which is why the course is on sale for 20% off, is that all of these plugins, they all have a different sound characteristic to them, and they all have a different flavor to them. Some have more obvious to the ear than others. Some are more subtle than others, but they all sound a little bit different. And so one technique that you can use is that if you have all of your instruments, as we do here, going through our SSL, we have the SSL kind of stamp on it, right? The SSL kind of flavor on all the tracks. But maybe there's a few tracks or a few groups of tracks, depending on the mix, where you may want to even highlight them even more or give those tracks something a little bit special. One example of that would typically be the lead vocal. Why? Because it's a vocal song, and usually the vocal is the featured instrument, right? So maybe because we did use this SSL channel strip on her vocal, we certainly did. We used some compression and some EQ, and it sounds great. But maybe we want to add something a little different to it, in addition to it. Why? Because from a sonic point of view, the sonic, the tone of the vocal is going to change slightly. If we add an additional compressor or an additional EQ, it's going to make this vocal stand out a little bit more, meaning that it's going to sound a little bit different than the rest of the tracks because it doesn't just have the SSL stamp on it. Maybe we're going to put another stamp on it. And this is a very common technique that a lot of engineers use. Now, in the digital world, we have the benefit that if we wanted to say use, for example, an LA2A compressor in the digital world, we can use as many LA2A compressors across every single track if we want to. But in the real world, in a real studio, you don't have that luxury. You'll be lucky if you have 2 LA2As in a studio. So as a mixing engineer, you would have to choose, well, where do I want to put that LA2A? Because I can't put it across all 14 of my tracks. I don't have 14 LA2As, right? So I only have 2 I can use. Where do I want to put them if I want to use them at all? And when I mix with these kinds of plugins, and this is one of the keys or secrets to making these plugins most effective, is to use them in the way that you would try to use them in the real world in an analog studio. So I wouldn't put 14 LA2As in my mix. Why? Because that's number one, it's not practical. Number two, that's not the way you would do it if you were mixing in an analog studio. It wouldn't have that same vibe and flavor because you didn't have 14 LA2As. You understand? But I might take that LA2A, and we'll do this in a second. I'm trying to set this up for people that are new to this. We may put that on 1 or 2 tracks to give that track a little something extra. And again, this is more of a subtle thing now, okay? So I always have to remind people, you got to be listening to this on either good headphones or good studio monitors. If you're not listening to this on either one of those, you're not going to hear the audible difference. And depending on the tracks, how well they recorded and what we use and all the other variables, it'll be more or less audible, but it's there. So now that I've kind of set that up, I hope that everyone kind of follows that and understands. If you don't, save your questions for the Q&A session. We'll go back and we'll review some of what I just said. But let's start with the vocal, okay? Because the vocal is the lead instrument in any song that has a vocal track in it, okay? So let's just loop. Let's start looping at the point where she kind of comes in the verse here.
Since I can't have you here, I'm going the places you'd be taking me if you could.
Okay, so now let's take a look at the channel strip and let's see what we're doing here for compression and EQ.
And it's crystal clear that even with distance, I'm loving you like I should.
So we're compressing pretty heavily, and if you were around when we did the vocal in the mix 4 or 5 weeks ago, we used this compressor pretty heavily because this vocal got pretty dynamic in different parts, and we used the compressor to really kind of clamp down on it. So we're compressing pretty heavily here. We also have on the EQ side, right around 14K, we have about 5 dB boost, and at right around 480 hertz, we took out about 3 dB on the EQ side. So now that sounds fine. There's nothing wrong with what we did. But what if we added something? So maybe we don't compress as hard. So maybe what I'm going to do is I'm going to dial back the threshold so we're not compressing as hard. Maybe we're only going to compress about 3 dB, and then we're going to add another compressor. So let's do that.
And I go walking where there's quartz in the gravel, there's jasper in the yard. And nobody's watching you. It's just the painted Mother Marys, the cowboys made of bronze.
Okay, so now we're only compressing about 3 dB, maybe 6 at its heaviest point. Now, another way a better way for me to even demonstrate this, I'm going to duplicate this track so we can do A/B. So we're going to duplicate it complete, which means it's going to put all the effects on here. So or all the plugins. So now we have, well, maybe vocal 3. We're gonna label this Vox 1B. Okay, and I'm going to change the color here just so it's easy for us to look at and stand out. That's not the one I want. Give me something a little bit more. Purple. Okay, so we got yellow and purple. Okay, so I'm going to go back to I'm going to mute this one here, the new one. I'm going to go back here I'm going to turn this threshold back down again to compress it heavy like we just were doing.
We're gonna move someday. We're gonna move to Santa Fe.
Okay, so I set the compressor back to where it was originally on the original track, which is in yellow. So now again, I'm going to mute this one. Now we're going to listen to the new one, the purple one, and I'm going to dial back that compression so it's not as heavy on the channel strip. Okay.
I'm going the places you'd be taking me if you could.
Okay, so we're just kind of kissing it, 3 dB or so.
And it's crystal clear
A little more.
that even with distance, I'm loving you like I should.
Okay, 3 to 6 dB. So we've cut that compression almost in half. Okay, everybody with me? I hope so. 40 people. Wonderful, wonderful. Now we're going to do the same thing on the EQ side. We're not going to shut the EQ off, so to speak, but I'm already thinking, and I'll walk you through this in a second, where I'm going to leave the mid-range cut, but maybe I'm going to take this boost on this top end and I'm going to dial that out a little bit.
And I go walking where
So now we're not doing a top end boost at all on this particular vocal, okay? So what did we do? We doing less compression on the channel strip. We're still taking out the mid-range cut at 480 or so, and we're not boosting the high end at all. Okay? So now what I'm going to do is we're going to add some of that, something to make this track sound a little bit different from a compression and an EQ perspective. Okay? Now we can use anything, but I'm going to just use something that's pretty common. So I'm going to use an 1176 by Universal Audio. And as you can see, none of my thumbnails here are, I have to redo all of my plugins in my browser, all the thumbnails and everything. I mean, I went clean. I got to set everything up from the beginning, which is one big pain in the butt, but it's the best way to do it. Okay. So we're going to grab an 1176. I'm not going to grab the Legacy. We're going to grab the Revy, okay, which is the blackface. And I'm going to put this on after the BX console. Okay, here we are. Okay. So now I'm going to use this to do a little bit of compression. So we're going to do a 4-to-1 ratio. We're going to do a pretty fast release. Okay, here we go. Let's just see what we got here.
there's quartz in the gravel, there's jasper in the yard. And nobody's watching you. It's just the painted Mother Marys, the cowboys made of bronze. We're gonna move someday. We're gonna move to Santa Fe. To Santa Fe.
Okay, so I'm trying to level match the plugin. So before and after, it's relatively the same volume. We're doing this kind of quick. So now what am I doing? Well, now I'm doing most of my compression, about 5 to 7 dB on the LA2A, okay, and only doing a little bit on the BX console. Okay, that's the first thing I'm going to do. Now, I want to talk a little bit about that top end. Another great thing that I like to do with vocals, especially female vocals, is use a Pultec EQ. While I'm here, I should probably reset my thumbnail. For people that don't know, and I get this email every once in a while, if you're a Stduio One user and you don't know what I just did, if you come over here to this little drop-down arrow, update plugin thumbnail, that in your browser is going to give you a little picture of your plugin so you can easily find it if you didn't know that. Save. All right, so now we're going to put a Pultec on here, and that's where we're going to do our top-end boost. So let me get my Pultec. Again, I got to be able to find it because I don't have my thumbnails. It's going to be in alphabetical order. Yes, it should be. Okay, so let's find it. Here we go. EQ P1A mono. Okay, so we're going to grab this one and we're going to put the Pultec. Now again, Waves also makes these native plugins as well. I have these, but we're just using these for today. So now what we're going to do, this is a tube EQ, okay? It has a really smooth top end, and it sounds great on anything. It's hard to make this thing sound bad. Well, maybe I shouldn't say that until we start playing around with it, right? Okay, so now we're going to go around that 12. We're talking about 14, 16K. We're going to do a little boost here, get a little bit of air, and we're going to see what we can get with this. So let's listen.
Since I can't have you I'm going the places you'd be taking me if you could.
And I'm going to exaggerate it a little just so you could hear it. Right now we're boosting 5 dB. It's 16K. I'm going to give it a little too much just so you can hear it.
And it's crystal clear that even with distance, I'm loving you like I should.
Okay, you can hear that on, off. Watch the red light. I'll turn it on and off with this little button here just so you can hear it. We'll start with it off, and then we bring it on. Listen to the air.
And I go walking where there's quartz in the gravel, there's jasper in the yard.
Hear that? Okay, now it's a little much. So we're gonna back it off a little. I just wanted you to be able to hear it. Okay? So what did we do now? So we added to this particular track an 1176 and in a Pultec EQ to supplement what we were doing here on the channel strip. And we've backed off the high-end EQ, right? And we've reduced the compression considerably, okay? So now what we're gonna do is I'm gonna we have the original track in yellow, which is before we did any of that stuff, right? And then I'm gonna mute that, we're gonna go back and forth. It's an easy way to me to sound back and forth. So you can hear the difference. Now, now let me just say up front, if you don't hear that much of a difference or you don't really think you hear a difference, it's okay. Especially if you're someone that's fairly new to using these plugins or you're fairly new to mixing and especially really understanding compression or being able to hear compression, okay? So if you can't hear the difference, don't think that there's something wrong with you or how come you can't hear it. Don't be frustrated because I'm telling you, every single one of us, me included, and any one of the 10 people in the chat that I know of is mixing for a long time, when they started, they'll tell you the same thing. It took them forever to really be able to hear compression, which is one of the reasons why I created Compression Made Easy, but that's for another time. So don't be frustrated by that, okay? But try to focus in and listen to what we're going to do here, okay? Okay, so we're going to start with the original in yellow. Oops, I want to do that. And then somewhere in the middle between these phrases, I'm going to switch over and see if you can hear the difference. Is there a difference? I don't know. Let's find out. Here's the original with just this channel strip.
Since I can't have you here, I'm going the places you'd be taking me if you could.
Okay, now we're going to go, oops, we're going to go to the next one.
And it's crystal clear that even with distance, I'm loving you like I should.
Back to the first one.
And I go walking where there's quartz in the gravel, there's jasper in the yard.
To the new one.
And nobody's watching you. It's just the painted Mother Marys, the cowboys made of bronze.
Okay, can everybody hear the difference? There is a noticeable difference there. And you saw me trying to move the faders up and down, so I wanted to level match the volume so you didn't hear one track being louder than another, and I think I'm pretty close now. One track is not louder, but one track sounds vastly different. Okay, one has a much more open top end, has a lot more forward impression. It almost feels like the vocal pulls a little bit more forward, and it sounds different tonally. Can everybody hear that? Who can't hear that? And it's okay if you can't hear it. I'm going to go back and do it again. But can people hear that? Again, over YouTube, God, I never know what it's going to sound like. But believe me, if you do this test in your studio with one of your mixes, or if you buy the live mixing series course and do it on this mix, you'll be able to hear it maybe a little bit better. Okay? Let's do it again. So we're going to start with the original vocal in yellow. Okay? And in between phrases, I'm going to switch. Now, I'm going to cheat and tell you what to listen for. Listen for the top end air. It gets a lot more open. And again, it almost feels like when we go to the purple track, the new track, the vocal pulls a little more forward. It's a little bit more, has a little bit more authority sounding, if you know what I mean. It's more in your face and it's more present and it's more right there. With the yellow track, it sits back a little bit, just a little. Now you can say, well, you know, you got to you could tweak the first compressor in EQ to make it sound exactly. Yeah, you can do all of that. That's not the point. Okay, these things sound different. You will never get these two tracks to sound exactly the same the way we have them set them up. You can get them a little closer, but that's not the point. What we're trying to do here is we're trying to take the lead instrument, the vocal, and we're trying to make that vocal have a special sound to it that's different from the rest of the instrumentation. Okay, so let's do it again. So here is the original with just the channel strip, and then the purple will flip back and forth. Here we go.
Since I can't have you here, I'm going the places you'd be taking me if you could.
Okay, now we're gonna go to the next one.
And it's crystal clear that even with distance, I'm loving you like I should.
Back to the original.
And I go walking where there's quartz in the gravel, there's jasper in the yard.
To the new track.
And nobody's watching you. It's just the painted Mother Marys, the cowboys made of bronze.
Okay, can you hear that? Let's see what everyone's saying in the chat. Johnny Lipsham says, loves the Pultec EQs. He can hear it. James says, big difference. Yes, James has been around a while. He knows. Let's see. MJ Smith saying, David's EQ and compression courses are a must-have. Oh, we'll get to, thank you. Yes, we'll talk about that after this. We're going to talk about why you should have these EQ and compression courses. It helps you learn this faster. Let's see. Johnny says, clear difference, make up front and more bell-like up top. Right. And smooth, not harsh. Okay. So that's one technique. I always, not always, but more times than not, I will do this on the lead vocal, because especially if the lead vocal, you know, on a track like this, where it's clearly the lead vocal is, excuse me, is the lead instrument. You know, sometimes if it's a real guitar heavy, hard rock track, I might do these on the guitars. But for this track on the vocal, pardon me. Okay, now does it just stop there? Well, not necessarily. So again, let's visually go back. And I say, okay, I'm in my analog studio now. I'm back in. I'm in Blackbird Studio there in Nashville, right? And I got my big SSL console and I have all this gear. But I've already now used I've used a 1176 and I used a Pultec. So now, what would most typical studios have? You know, again, we said we may have a pair of 1176s. Maybe we have an LA2A, right? Probably have an LA2A. We may have two Pultecs if we're lucky, right? Okay. And there'll be some other stuff, distressors, and there's some other ones. So I'm trying to give you guys the more popular ones. So I wouldn't use now, if I want to say, well, if I have an LA2A, what does an LA2A do? Where does that usually sound really great? On a lot of things. Sounds great on vocals too, but we just use an 1176. But an LA2A sounds great on bass. Sounds great on bass. So maybe I now drop the LA2A on the bass and I do the same concept. Do I have to? No, you don't have to. But once again, let's listen to the difference. So let me duplicate the track. Let me save this. Duplicate complete. Okay, and we're going to do bass DI2, and we'll go ahead and we'll change one of the colors here just so you can see that a little differently. No, not brown, because those are drums. Orange. Okay, so we have bass DI and then bass DI2. DI2. Okay, let's take a look at what we did on the first one. So on the first one, oh, we didn't use the channel strip. We used the Tone Spot Bass Pro on that. It's a bad example. But you know, let's go ahead and let's put the channel strip on there. If you were around for the other videos, you would know what I'm talking about. Let me go back. Let me set up the console for this bass.
We're gonna move someday. We're gonna move to Santa Fe. To Santa Fe.
Okay, so I would typically, from a compression point of view on a bass, that's what I would be doing. I shut off the EQ because we didn't need it. I took off the filters, okay, for an example. So now, let's move that over to our new track. Let's do the same thing, but let me back off the compression a little bit.
Since I can't have you here, I'm going the places you'd be taking me if you could.
Okay, so now I'm only compressing about 3 dB. Now you don't have to use the compressor at all. Sometimes what I'll do is I'll shut the compressor off and just run the signal through the plugin to model the preamp, the input, and the output part of the channel strip. That's for another video. A lot more discussion in that in mixing with analog style plugins made easy. But in this case, we're going to use it where we're just lightly compressing. So now again, let's go back and let's talk about the LA2A. Okay, so let me go find my LA2A. And then we have several of them, but let's use no, we don't want the legacy. We want the gray, this one here. Okay, and I'm going to drop this on our new track here. Now again, why an LA2A? Because LA2A sound great on bass. You can use any plugin, okay? I'm just using things that I would typically use. And let's do the same thing. Let's a little more heavily compress this now.
And it's crystal clear that even with distance, I'm loving you like I should. And I go walking where.
Okay, so now we're compressing about the same amount as we were on the original track on the channel strip. 7 to 10 dB of compression on the heaviest notes, okay? So let's do the same thing. Now again, this is gonna be a little more subtle because bass is a little more subtle in general. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna turn up the bass bus a little louder than it should be in the mix, so maybe you guys can hear this a little bit better. We're gonna do the same thing. We're gonna start with the original track, and then we're gonna mute that and turn on the track with the LA2A and hear the difference. Here's the original.
Have you here? I'm going the places you'd be taking me if you could. And it's crystal clear that even with distance, I'm loving you like I should. And I go walking where
It's the original.
there's quartz in the gravel, there's jasper in the yard. And nobody's watching you.
Here's the LA2A.
It's just the painted Mother Marys, the cowboys made of bronze. We're gonna move someday. We're gonna move to Santa Fe.
Okay, can everyone hear the difference there? Now it's a little more subtle, so I'm gonna tell you what I hear. What I hear is I hear on the LA2A, the bottom is a little bit more round. Okay, it's a little bit more round, and then more toward the fingers on the top end, 700 hertz to 1K. In that ballpark, you can hear a little bit more presence on the fingers. It cuts a little more, just a little. Okay, it's not as obvious as the vocal. It's a little more subtle. The SSL sounds great. The SSL, it sits a little bit more in the pocket. It doesn't stand out as much, okay? Again, now we're talking about subtle differences here, okay? Keep that in mind. It's supposed to be subtle. Hopefully everybody can hear that. I'm gonna do it again so you guys can hear the difference. I think I've level matched the two tracks pretty close, okay? So we're gonna start with the original, okay? I'm gonna turn up the bass even a little more in the mix. It's too loud in the mix now, but I want you to be able to hear the difference. So here we go with the original track, and then I'll try to bounce back and forth.
Since I can't have you here, I'm going the places you'd be taking me if you could. And it's crystal clear that even with distance, I'm loving you like I should. And I go
Okay, can everyone hear the difference? Okay, it's, well, again, more subtle than the lead vocal, but it's definitely there. Okay, it sounds different. It tonally sounds completely different. Okay, and the more you get your ears tuned into compression, the more you'll be able to hear how obvious that is. To me, that's an extreme. It's not really extreme, but when you're sensitive to this stuff, and you will over time, you'll be able to hear how much of a difference that really is. It doesn't sound better than the original track. It sounds different. Okay, so by using and employing this technique, and again, I wouldn't do this on every track. Again, we pick a couple of tracks where we want to try to feature something to give a little bit different flavor. This is like adding a little extra salt in the soup. You can add too much salt to the soup very quickly if you're not careful. And then if you do this, and then we'll trail back around and we'll get to some Q&A in a minute here. If you were to, because again, we have as many of these as we want in our studio now. We have our virtual studio here. We have as many LA2As as we want. And if you put these on 13 out of the 14 tracks, what happens? All that uniqueness that we just gained in the bass is now gone. Again, it sounds like everything else now, right? So the key to this is to do this in very small doses, okay? And sometimes I will do it even when I don't feel like I really need to, and meaning that this sounded fine. There's nothing wrong with that, right? It sounded great. Nothing wrong with that. I throw this in because I know it's going to add a little bit of a different tone to it. I don't overthink it. I'm explaining it like I'm overthinking it because I know this is a lot of new folk, and I want to make sure you understand the philosophy behind it. But when you're doing it, I don't overthink it. I don't sit here and I don't debate into this and that and this and that and make sure the needle is in the exact spot on both. No, you don't work music. Like the analogy is, you don't work music, you play music, right? And when we're working with these, we're playing music. You gotta learn how to turn the techie side of your brain off when you're doing this. I know when I'm teaching it to you, I'm talking to you from a technical point of view, but when you're in the moment and doing this, you're not getting that crazy about it. You're not trying to say, well, I got to make sure we have the exact amount of compression and the level's got to be absolutely perfect and level matched. As soon as you do that, you've taken you took the creative part of your brain and you flushed it down the toilet, and now you're thinking like a software engineer. And this is where sometimes mixes can sound flat and sterile when people overthink this stuff. You got to get yourself to a point where you throw it on there, you twist some knobs, you go, it sounds good to my ear, I'm done. It should be a 10 or 20 second event, not 20 minutes. If you spend 20 minutes trying to dial in what we just did in your mix, you're spending way too long, okay? At first, you'll spend that much time because you have to be able to tune your ears. But once you get to that point, this is a quick thing, okay? So that's this week's lesson on how you can just add a little bit of extra flavor, a little bit of salt to the soup that makes the mix sound a little bit more unique. And you'll find over time that you'll find different things that you go to, right? You'll find certain compressors that you'll go to for certain instruments. You might find, and you may always try to highlight the lead vocal, or maybe you always try to highlight the guitar or a snare drum or whatever. You'll find your own way of doing this, and there is no right or wrong to any of it. The only thing I'll caution you again is that you don't do this across a lot of the tracks. You do this in very selective ways, subtle. And that will just give another little uniqueness to your mix that will sound different than everybody else's. And this is a very common technique that a lot of engineers do, but they don't tell you about, okay? And this is why they do it. There's a reason why if you have an SSL's desk in a studio, a real analog desk, why do you think they use all those outboard pieces of gear? They don't need to. They can just do everything right on the desk. This is why they do it, because it makes it sound different, unique, special to their ear or to their client's ear, and that's why they do it. So I hope that was helpful. Let's get on over to a Q&A. We'll go back to our chat room here. Hopefully you guys will see that in a second. We still have 35 people here, so a few people cut out, but that's okay. We still got a lot of people here. I'm very happy about that. So if you guys have any questions on that, if you want me to elaborate anything, please, or anything else, you guys can ask. We've been on here a little over an hour. Hopefully you guys all heard all of that. You can hear the differences. And let's take some questions. What do we have going on here? Let me just go back up here. Let's see here. Let me see. Try to see if there's anyone asked any questions while I was kind of talking there. We'll go back up here a few. All right. Okay, we'll start with Evan. Evan's okay. Evan says Pultec sounds good even with everything off. Yes. A Pultec will sound great on just about it. It's hard to make a Pultec sound bad, really. Pultecs are great. I love Pultec EQs. They sound awesome on just about everything. Let's see. James says, is the LA2A a various MU, like the more you compress, the higher the ratio automatically goes? Yes, it is. And so, you know, again, I didn't get really into this because I don't want to complicate it, but one of the reasons why it sounds different is because the way the compressor reacts to the signal going into an LA2A is different than the compressor on the SSL channel strip. Not to mention on the SSL channel strip, you have a variable ratio. You can dial in your own ratio. You can dial in your own attack and release. You don't do that on an LA2A. Okay, that is all kind of done under the hood as you push the signal through. So that's one of the reasons why it sounds a little bit different as well, which is true. Let's see. Good point. That's a very good point. Let's see. Let me go scroll down here a little bit. David says a little more growl on the bass with the LA2A. Yep, it does sound a little different. James says it doesn't speak to the compression ratio. Right. We just talked about that. You're absolutely right. And again, that's okay. That's not the point. You're right in what you're saying. But again, when I'm doing this and when you're doing this, don't think about that. Don't think about, well, the ratio is not the same as what's on the other plugin. It doesn't matter. That's not the point. Does it sound right to you? That's the point. Okay. But you're absolutely right. It's not going to sound the same. It's not supposed to sound the same. If it was to sound the same, then everything I just told you about for the last 55 minutes doesn't mean anything, right? It's going to sound different. And that's the whole point. Oh, hey, Mike. Mike just showed up. How you doing? Got home from work. Hope you had a good night at work. Let's see. Johnny Lipsham says, a nice 60s P bass, a flat wound strings into an LA2A always sounds glorious. Yeah, I would have. That's true. Let's see. Evan says the new one is better. Okay, cool. David says, definitely more bottom. I hear a difference with the bass. I hear more of a difference with the bass than I do with the vocal. Okay, yeah, that's cool. That's cool. I'm glad you can hear the difference, though, on both. That's important. Rock is here. Hey, Rock, what's going on? Let's see. What else? Who else? Let me just scroll down to make sure I'm not missing any questions here. Oh, hey, Woodbeast is here. What's up, buddy? Oh, hey, Randall. Thank you so much. Randall just did a super chat. That's very, very nice of you. I really do appreciate it. Again, anyone that wants to, contribute to the cause of me doing these every week, I really do appreciate that. Thank you, Randall. You're the best, buddy. I do appreciate that. Let's see. Truckster's here. Hey, Truckster. Just got a new Presonus 1018 audio interface. Good bit of kit. Excellent. Congratulations on the new purchase, man. Congratulations. Frank says, would you consider printing out a list of plugins that you think would work well on certain instruments? Yeah, I mean, I guess, the thing is, yeah, I mean, there would be nothing wrong with that, but the problem is, it doesn't mean you guys have all the same plugins I have. Most of you don't. And so I don't know how helpful that list would be. Also, too, sometimes sometimes I hesitate to do those types of things because I don't want to give anyone any preconceived notions that, like I said, LA2A sounds great on bass, but that doesn't mean you should always use an LA2A, and it doesn't mean other compressors don't sound great on bass. There's a lot of compressors that sound great on bass. It depends on the way the bass was recorded, the way it was played. Was it played with fingers? Was it played with a pick? What kind of music is it? How was it recorded? Would dictate the raw track, the tone of the track would dictate what compressor I would pick. So there's maybe some value to that, Frank, but I don't know that there's enough to do that. And again, it's almost like EQ settings, where there's basic, fundamental EQ curves for certain instruments. I always hesitate to do that because not every track is the same. And so in other words, I wouldn't always use an LA2A on bass. I would use a DBX 160 on bass a lot of times. If the bass was really dark sounding, I would use an 1176 Blue Stripe, maybe. So it really depends. Yeah, I hope that kind of answers your question. Let's see. Evan says, in the middle of recording bass on a project, so this is great for me. Oh, cool, man. The biggest thing you can do is just make sure you get a really good, solid recording, a raw track. If it sounds good, raw, when you pull up the fader with no processing, then anything you do to it is only going to enhance it, which is great. Woodbeast asks, the Vox Mini Super Beetle 25. Anyone use this? I don't even know what that is. So I would have to say no. Maybe other people do. Let's see. Multis. Hey, how's it going? What is your thought on clippers? Standard clip. I'm not sure what do you mean by clippers? I'm not sure what that means. I'm not familiar. Johnny says, Dave, if you want to click where it says Top Chat, give you a coupon. Oh, excuse me, give you an option for live chat. You're possibly missing posts. Oh, I see. Yeah, I see that. No, I saw that. Thanks, man. James says there's already a compressor and cheat sheet and that kind of speaks to common compressors on certain instruments. And I have one in Compression Made Easy too, by the way. So if you get the course, you'll get that. Truckster says maybe a list of compressors for instruments. Yeah, we just kind of talked about that. Let's see. Oop. Cool. Any other questions? Let's see what's going on here. We got 39 people here, man. Still, that's awesome. Again, next week, what we're going to do, we're going to probably finish up with this song. Next week, we're going to work with, how we can add some different type, again, another different kind of plugin, some saturators, exciters, things like that on the master bus, excuse me, that will, that'll give us even a little bit more enhancement to the mix. We'll do that next week. Are there any more questions? Let's see. Ricky Jacob Sr. Hey, Ricky, what's up? How do you check that your mix will sound good on small speakers and cell phone speakers? By doing just that, by exporting it as an MP3 and import it into my phone. That's one way to do it. The other thing you can use is a plugin called the Mix Checker Pro. I've done a review on that on my YouTube channel, Home Recording Made Easy, that you know about because you're here. Go check out the Mix Checker Pro by Audified. And that plugin you put on your master bus is the last plugin in the chain. And that's going to give you the ability to, they've simulated different listening environments. So you can hear your mix on what it would sound like on a cell phone, on a car stereo, on a home hi-fi stereo, those kinds of things. Really good plugin. And if you're a part of mixingmadeeasy.net, which I haven't mentioned tonight, as part of our mixing contest, I give away free plugins every month. And I have 4 or 5 of those licenses. As a matter of fact, we just gave one away 2 months ago to a lucky winner. And that's like a $100 plugin you get for free if you join the mixing contest and you happen to win. So you should check out mixingmadeeasy.net. But that's a plugin you can check out. David SJ. Hey, Dave, is the music that played during the countdown from your studio? Some of it is. It's a compilation of some jazz stuff. Some of it's stock music. Some of it's from my studio. It's the only thing that I can use that I couldn't get copyright strikes because I tried to do something in the first video of our series that's no longer on YouTube, and I got all kinds of copyright claims because I actually, because I used the video on YouTube, I just took a backing track on YouTube that was already published, and I just played that in the background, and so then I had some stock music that I use. It's just a a little compilation, 15-minute of a bunch of little jazz tracks. Let's see. James says, very useful and app with a graphic EQ. So when you listen in the car, excuse me, on the phone, etc., you can adjust to see what can be adjusted to make it sound better. Yeah, it's very true. Let's see. What's that over there? Okay. Luis is here. Hey, what's up? David, did you install Cubase? I'm moving away from it too. I love Stduio One more. No, I did not install Cubase in the iMac Pro. Nope, did not. Or Pro Tools. The iMac Pro, the only DAWs I have in here are Stduio One and Logic because I have Logic. I don't really use it much, but I have it and I paid for it years ago, so I installed it. But I did not, and I did not install, God, I would say 40% of the plugins that I had on my old system that I don't use, I didn't install. I really went through and only brought the stuff that I use. and all the old stuff I got rid of, a lot of old applications. And that's why I didn't want to, when I bought my new computer, I didn't want to take the time machine and I didn't want to migrate it over, which is, you know, Mac's easy way of just, you know, getting your new computer to be set up just like your old computer. They have a thing called the Migrate Assistant, I think it's called, where basically you take up your backup drive, you plug it in, and it just uploads everything. You know, it takes 4 or 5 hours depending on how big your drive is. But then your new computer is set up and looks just like the one you just came from. But the problem with that is, at least for me, is because my computer was so old, there's a lot of old crap on there I didn't want to bring over to the new system, and I didn't want to have to sift through it all. And sometimes when you do that, you could have some things that don't really work well. So I wanted to do a really fresh install. So I went to all the different plugin websites, Presonus's websites. I downloaded everything fresh. And so, yeah, so I'm, you know, and I had to get a few things to work and stuff. It took me a little bit of time, but in the end, I think it's a much better solution. So that's cool. Let's see. David SJ says, any experience with Reaper? Just started using it after Mixcraft got too frustrating. No, I don't have any experience with Reaper. The only experience I have with DAWs is Cubase, Pro Tools, and Stduio One. And as I just said, I don't have 2 of those on my system, and I have no plans to use them. You know, again, I mean, Cubase is a great DAW, don't get me wrong, but I don't use it. It just takes up space on my hard drive. And so again, I just wanted to try to, you know, I focus mostly in Stduio One because that's what most of my students use. 75% of you use Stduio One. And so that's why I use it, which is kind of weird because, you know, people sometimes they think I don't teach you Stduio. I mean, well, I have a couple of courses that teach you how to use Stduio One for beginners. I do have those, but the majority of my curriculum and all of my training, the DAW has absolutely nothing to do with anything we talked about here tonight. You do this in any DAW. And that's how most of my training is set up. It's really not DAW specific, but you know, I love Stduio One and I use it and it's, you know, works great. And so, you know, most of my students have it. And I know that from a learning perspective, it's always nice to be able to see the same screen that you're using, that your instructor's using. There is a benefit to that for the student. I get it. But I try to teach more universal concepts because the DAW really doesn't matter. And I get lots of emails about DAWs and people switching DAWs all the time. And I just say, find one that you're comfortable with and stick with it. Doesn't matter what it is. You know, Cubase, Pro Tools, whatever. If you have one that works for you, stick with it. You don't need to switch unless there's something in your DAW that your DAW doesn't do that a new one would do. And again, I don't know, because, you know, people like Johnny Lipsham would be a little bit more hip to this than me. I don't know every single feature or facet of Stduio One and how that compares to every single feature or facet of Reaper or Cubase or Pro Tools, but they all basically do the same thing. They all do things a little bit differently, but I don't know that one's really, from a feature set standpoint, head and shoulders above the other one. I just think most of it's a workflow thing. Stduio One, I think, is great because it's an easier workflow than something like Pro Tools. But can Pro Tools do most of what Stduio One does? Yes. And same thing with Cubase. So it's just a matter of what you're comfortable with. They don't sound any different. For people to think one DAW sounds different than another, I don't buy that. I've listened to all of them. I know there's some people that will claim one sounds better. Then I can't hear that difference. So I just say, hey man, you could try out some different ones, find one that's most comfortable for you and stick with it. And once you find one you like, stick with it and really learn it. You know, that would be my advice. Oh, let's see. Missed a couple here. A lot of questions. Awesome. Let's see. Mike says, when using hey Mike, buddy, what's up? When using compression, I go with what sounds good on the source. I tend to use FET on drums and vocals, FET style meaning like 1176-ish, optical compressor, or FET on bass depending on what kind of sound I'm going for. Exactly, right? They sound different, and you're at the point where you know what the differences are in the way they sound, and you're going to pick and choose based on whatever you're working on, right? And I don't even think of it anymore as FET versus optical versus, you know, I just, you know, I don't think of it in those terms anymore. I just know, I know an 1176 is a FET style compressor. I know that, but I just know that compressor sounds excellent on A, B, C, and D. And that's how I kind of think of it now. But very good point. Brian's here. Hey, Brian, what's up, buddy? It looks like you do all pre-fader sends and then control them on the actual faders. Pros and cons versus doing post-fader and leaving the effects fader at Unity. You can do either. I always do pre-fader. That's just the way I do it. Pre-fader meaning, for folks that don't know, on the sends here, he's talking about everything here is in amber. If I were to click this and it turns to blue, blue is post-fader. Orange or amber is pre-fader. What that means is that if you have this on pre-fader, whatever I do with this output fader here on this that I'm moving up and down here has nothing to do with what's being sent to the effect because it's pre-fader prior to the signal going here. Conversely, if I'm on post-fader and I send, let's say I send, negative 3 dB to my reverb unit, but then I turn this down, that affects the send level going to the reverb unit. So what he's asking is, can you set everything at Unity here on the effects track and do everything post fader? I suppose you could. I never really thought that deep about it, but yeah, I suppose you could. Are there pros and cons to it? Offhand, I don't think there are any. I just think it's a workflow thing. There might be some small detail that I'm just not thinking of because I don't do it the way you're describing, but either way can work. So I hope that helps. Let's see. Good question though. Let's see. James says, license hell when migrating. Oh, you mean when migrating over? Yeah, I think you're right. But when I used to do that in the past, I've always done migrating. I've never really had a problem with licenses, so to speak. I was always lucky, and I don't know if that's a Mac thing versus a Windows thing. I don't know if Windows PCs do the same kind of thing that Mac does with the migration. I'm sure they do. I'm just not up on Windows. And maybe with Windows, it's a little bit more of a pain in the ass. I don't know. But when I've done it in previous Macs, in my home office and stuff with licenses for software and such, I never really had a problem with that. Yeah, I never really had an issue. As a matter of fact, when I used to have a 2009 Mac Pro, when I bought the 2013 in 2013, I did a migration. And I had no problems with anything working. As a matter of fact, none of my plugins had any problems. I had more problems doing it the way I did it this time with plugins, believe it or not. Not big problems, but I had to email people like Slate. Slate was a pain in the ass, to be honest. I got it all to work, but it was a pain in the ass. And Waves. Waves was a pain in the ass too, but Waves is great. Waves, you could call them up, talk to tech support. They logged into my computer and did it for me in 5 minutes, which was great. But I had a problem getting all my Waves plugins to work. But now it's all worked out. But I didn't have a problem during migrating in the past. I don't know why. Maybe I just got lucky. I don't know. Let's see. Do you prefer Stduio One because it a better workflow, or does it also sound better in comparison to Cubase and Pro Tools? As I just said, it doesn't sound any different to me. And again, there are folks out there that will claim one DAW sounds different than another. I don't buy that. But again, that's just my opinion. Again, everything I say here is my opinion. It's not gospel, right? I do it for workflow. Stduio One, workflow-wise, to me, is the most intuitive DAW I've ever used. Now, what's a close second Cubase? And we've talked about this before. Stduio One is very Cubase-like. It's very Cubase-esque. The reason for that is when Stduio One was first developed, it was developed by a few, I don't know how many, but I would say a handful of engineers that used to work for Steinberg that helped design Cubase. So there were a lot of Cubase elements. And now Stduio One has kind of taken off and gone in their own direction, and Cubase has actually copied a couple things from Stduio One. So if you were to go from Stduio One to Cubase or Cubase to Stduio One, that transition would be much easier than if you went from Pro Tools to Stduio One, or God forbid, Stduio One back to Pro Tools. So it's really, for me, more of a workflow thing. The other thing that I found about Pro Tools, my biggest gripe with Pro Tools was in the beginning, before there was a Stduio One, really, is the stability is horrible. On the native system, now if you had the HDX system and you were going to spend all that money like a lot of big time studios, it was a lot more stable. But Pro Tools for me, and I used it on Windows machines, Macs, different operating systems, I always had issues with stability with Pro Tools, always. And so does the industry too, by the way. At least back in the days when I got out of Pro Tools, it was right around the time of around Pro Tools 10. Even the industry had problems with it, because I've been to industry functions and talked to people in the business, and they've said the same thing. A lot of big time studios would have a full-time person on staff just to manage the Pro Tool problems. Now you say, well, why the hell would they continue to use Pro Tools? Because a lot of those big studios had the big HDX systems where they invested tens of thousands of dollars in that system. Not to mention, back in the day, Pro Tools was the industry standard. Now, some people will say it still is, and I don't know that it is or it isn't, but I know that that curve has changed. And I don't think Pro Tools is as relevant as it once was. Although you'll read online, and I've had people leave comments on my YouTube channel saying that, no, you're not a pro engineer unless you use Pro Tools. And those are people that have absolutely zero understanding on this craft. They really do. It doesn't mean that Pro Tools is a bad DAW. It's not a bad DAW. I mean, Pro Tools revolutionized the way you did digital recording. They did. That's fact. Now, have they been stale over the last several years? And again, I know there's Pro Tools 11, Pro Tools 12. I'm not hip to those. So those it could be much better, much more stable. I just don't know. But Pro Tools 10, Pro Tools 9, Pro Tools 8, Pro Tools 7, which I've worked on all of them. It was hell as far as stability went, which is one of the reasons why I originally moved to a Cubase and then over to Stduio One. And the only reason why I left Cubase to go to Stduio One at that time is because at that time, Stduio One was the first DAW to be 64-bit. Most DAWs, Pro Tools included, and Cubase at that time, which I think was Cubase 4 or 5, was only 32-bit. So you couldn't take advantage of all the power of your computer, that because it wasn't 64-bit. Stduio One was 64-bit at that time, and that's what made me make the move originally. And when I made the move, I really liked it. I just stuck with it. And like I tell people, you find something you like, stick with it. And that's the whole thing on that. But yeah, don't let anybody tell you about any DAW that if you don't have a certain DAW, you can't make good music or you can't make good mixes or you're not professional or whatever. Those types of folks have zero understanding on this stuff. They really do. And those are people that just have to spout off and say something negative. And so, but again, if you want to work in the industry, like if you want to work in, say you were in, in Nashville, LA, New York, where you're working in big time studios, most of them are still using Pro Tools, I would think. And so if you wanted to work in that environment with those kinds of people and those kinds of, in that scene, you would want to know Pro Tools. You would, so that there's still some value to that. It depends on what you're doing. But in the home studio environment, which is what most people here are, you don't need to use Pro Tools. If you have it and you like it and it works, stick with it. But, anyhow, let's see. What else? Okay. Okay. Evan says, ever try tape saturation in parallel on the bass bus? Yes, I have. We've done that before in other tutorials. John says, thanks. You're welcome. James says, uses Logic. Very easy to follow. You're using Stduio One. Yeah, Logic's a great DAW too, especially if you're a Mac guy, because it's made for Mac. It's probably tuned to work with Mac very well. I like Logic as well. If I had to say what would be the other DAW that I would be inclined to use outside of Stduio One, would probably be Logic. I like Logic. I don't use it much, but I like it. Let's see. Mike says, experiment. Don't be afraid to try something different. Learn what a compressor does, the sound of the instrument, not have someone tell you what to use. Exactly. Mike says, that's my 2 cents. And then, great point. That's why I always say I don't tell you what to use. I tell you what you can use, but you always hear me say over and over, you can use anything. It doesn't matter what you use. If you're taking my courses and you don't have all the same plugins that I have, don't worry about the plugin as much as the technique and the concept. The plugins only matter when you start getting into some of these different subtlety things and you're really looking to try to do things with more of an analog style feel. Then the plugins matter to some degree. But, again, whether I'm using Universal Audio or using Waves plugins, it doesn't matter. They both sound great. They're going to sound a little different, but they both sound great. Use what you have and get good at the concepts and the techniques before you worry about the plugin as much, is what I should say. MG Smith, thanks, David. See you guys next time. Hey, take care, man. Thank you for stopping by. We still got 35 people here, which is great. Johnny Lipsham says the whole DAWs having a sound thing is a myth. I agree. I don't buy any of that. Although there'll be people that'll tell you that you're dead wrong. Believe me. That's amazing. Some of the comments I get on my YouTube channel is unbelievable. Sometimes I can't read them first thing in the morning because I'm still waking up and it just aggravates the hell out of me. I can't read them. Some of the things that are written, you know. Not all, most are not like that, but the few, unbelievable. Okay, let's see. Johnny says, in regard to EQ and compression, I think about which is best for the tool, which is the best tool for the job at hand. Exactly. What is the source? What do you want it to sound like? You know what tools you have in your toolbox, meaning what kind of plugins you have. And then you say, well, I want this thing to sound like X. And I know this plugin will make it sound like that. And that's what you do, right? So it changes all the time. And that's why I always say when people ask about cheat sheets and templates and this and that, I try to refrain from that because I don't want to put you in a box and make you limited. I want you to go into this with there's no rules. Experiment. Use, and again, this is how I learned it. You know, what I just did tonight, we put a LA2A on a bass, for example. Get that same bass track, copy it 12 times and put 12 different compressors on the track and listen to them all. And find out what you like. Find out what the compressor that you're using can and can't do. Twist the knobs all the way. You know, try to figure out how that particular plugin sounds and what it can and can't do. And that takes time too. I mean, it takes, you know, this whole thing is a craft that takes time to learn. It doesn't happen in a weekend, right? So take a few months, you know, sporadically as you have time and experiment. Do exactly what we did tonight. Exactly what you saw me do. You do it, but do it with 5 or 6 or 10. If you have 10 different compressors, put 10 different compressors on that vocal or on that bass track and learn and you'll start to hear what you like and more importantly, what you don't like, right? What not to do. And that's how you start to find the go-tos. And then you'll have different go-to techniques and plugins than I have or that anyone here in the chat room has. And that's what makes you a unique mixer. It's just like a unique player of an instrument. You know, they have their own certain sound, whether it's drum, bass, guitar, whatever. They have a certain style. It's the same kind of thing. And so you want to try to develop your own style. So my whole existence here on YouTube and on Home Recording Made Easy and MixingMadeEasy.net is not to show you how what I would do all the time or for you to copy what I do. That is so not the point. That's why I use so many different plugins, so many different techniques. A lot of times in the mixes and some of the training courses, I'll show you a problem area with a track and we'll do a little bit of it, but I don't do the whole thing for you. You go do the whole thing. Or over MixingMadeEasy.net, I always supply my final mix of the content that month. And it's not my best mix. Most times your mixes are better than mine because I'm trying to teach it to you. My goal is not to show you how great of a mix I could come up with. You missed the whole point. Or to copy everything that I'm doing. You missed the whole point. I'm trying to throw a bunch of different ideas at you of ways that you can do things so you can pick and choose what works for you to develop your own style, your own sound, your own techniques, and your own workflow. That's the whole real point around what I do. And that's where I think where I'm a little bit unique from an instructor point of view. Okay, is I don't just show you how I mix and copy me and your mixes will sound just like mine. No, they won't. They won't. You don't have the same ear that I have. That doesn't mean I have a better ear than you. It means we have different ears. You hear things differently than me. I hear things differently than Mike or Johnny or James. And we're all going to mix a little bit differently. And it's all very subjective, right? In the end, it's all very subjective. What sounds good to you is what matters, not what sounds good to me or anybody else. So hope that makes sense. And I say all of that for a lot of the people. I know there's a few of you here that are here for the first time and you may have never saw any of my training. And that's the point, is not to just have you copy me or show you what a great mixing engineer I am. You know, that's not the point at all. Okay. So hopefully that answers anyone that may be thinking about that. Let's see. Johnny says we can't see Stduio One, dude. Yeah, I'm not in. Well, yeah, I don't have that screen up right now. Let's see. Mike says, even try all free stuff out there. That is what I did. Trust me, you will learn what does and does not sound good, what works, and what works on what. Don't be satisfied with using one type or the same source. Yeah, the only thing I would caution people around free plugins is be careful, because I've known, especially, I shouldn't say especially with Stduio One, but I know it happens a lot in Stduio One. Some of those free plugins don't always play nice with certain DAWs, and you can have all kinds of problems and you won't realize that it's a plugin issue, especially with CPU spikes. So just be careful that when you do that, you know, don't download a bunch of free stuff all at once. Do one or two at a time. Try them out. Make sure your system works well with it. Okay, that's just one thing you want to be cautioned about. But the point is very valid. Let's see. Oops, scrolled down too far. Tool on the boards. Hey, what's up, man? You must be someone that's here for the first time. I don't recognize your name, and if you are, welcome. Stduio One's workflow is amazing. DAWs don't sound different. Whatever it came from, wherever it came from, it should go back. I hate Pro Tools. Glad I made the switch. There you go, man. A lot of people don't like Pro Tools. I'm one of those people. Hey, Dave, any thoughts on SonarWorks reference 4? Cheers. Yes, I've used it. There's the headphone plug-in and then the Stduio with the microphone where you can do the whole thing. And again, I have both of those I give away at mixingmadeeasy.net. If you're not a member of mixingmadeeasy.net and you want all this kind of training, if you're new here, go check out mixingmadeeasy.net. But yes, I think it's great. I think they have great tools. They're very useful, especially if you have what's the word? If you have a mixing environment that's not ideal. From a space point of view, from an acoustic treatment point of view and all that stuff, those things are very, very helpful. Or if you're mixing with headphones, that'll help give you a more flat response if you use the headphone plugin. So I think they're very, very good and they work very well. Lewis asks, hey Lewis, David, are you Firewire or Thunderbolt on your iMac? I have an old 2009 Mac Pro. I had one of those too, man. I still have it in the back. I don't use it. To me, it's probably going to be a collector's item one day. I was thinking about upgrading to an iMac, but with my interface Firewire, not sure if I need to update the interface. I'm Thunderbolt. Firewire is no longer a thing on Macs anymore. That's old school stuff. That was what it was on the 2009 Mac Pro. I have the same one. I'm surprised you're still running that. It's still running good, man. That's the thing about a Mac. You can run a Mac for 10, 15 years and it will still run. That's what I love about Mac. But anyway, if your interface is Firewire, I believe they make adapters from Firewire to USB 3 or Firewire to Thunderbolt. So if you like your interface, you should be able to still use it with an adapter or a dongle, whatever they call it. The iMacs are great. If you're using an old 2009 Mac Pro and you go to any new iMac computer, the difference in performance and speed is going to blow you away. Not to mention, I would imagine in your 2009, you probably don't have any more than a quad-core processor. And even though you can get a quad or a 6-core or an 8-core in a new iMac, the processors are so much faster. The memory is so much faster. They all have SSD drives today. You're going to get a hell of a lot more performance. But so you should still be able to use your old interface. Yes, you'll just need an adapter of some kind. So let us know if you do decide to upgrade. But yeah, I ran a 2009 Mac Pro for 4 years in my studio with it, and it worked great at that time. They worked great. Let's see. Evan says, Pro Tools is everywhere, so there's that. Yes, Pro Tools is all over the place in big-time studios. James says, Thunderbolt. Yep, thanks, James, for chiming in on that. Oops, what'd I do here? Here we go. Mike says, Stduio One is the best for workflow. I would agree. People that say you are not a pro without Pro Tools is probably work for Avid. No, that's not true. People that say that really have absolutely no understanding of. They really don't. It's like the same thing. What was it? Same thing about plugins. People say, "Oh, you can't get good mixes with plugin. You can't get good mix. You can't achieve a good mix with stock plugins." Of course you can. Half the content on my channel is all about using stock plugins. I got many courses where we only mix with stock plugins. We've been down that rabbit trail a million times. Someone that says you can't without a certain piece of software or gear has no understanding of what they're talking about. And that's the truth. I don't tell you you need any of this stuff. I just tell you that if you're going to use these kinds of, in this example, plugins, I'm going to show you how to use them the most effective way that I know how to use them and why they're different from stock plugins. But it doesn't mean you can't be a good mixing engineer with just using stock plugins. Yes, you can. Are they limiting in the sound? Yes. Is that a bad thing? No. Again, it's not better, it's difference. And it's the same thing with DAWs that people just don't understand, or gear. I mean, and again, and I know this because I get these kinds of dopey comments on my videos every now and again, you know, but that's okay. Hey, it's okay. It's okay. But you're right. It's, don't let people tell you you can't. It's not the gear, it's the engineer for 75% of it. The other 25% have to do with the gear, the plugins, the stuff like that. There is, you know, it is going to be, you know, it's just like anything, right? In some cases, you know, when you talk about studio gear, you get what you pay for, you know, sometimes, you know, and where that really matters, I try to tell you when you guys ask me about like speakers, for example, monitors. Is there a big difference between a $300 set of monitors and a $3,000 set of monitors? You absolutely bet there is. Does it mean you need to have a $3,000 set of monitors? Of course not. You know, if you get bottom of the barrel price range because that's all you can afford, that's fine. Start there. If that's not good enough for you and you don't like the way they sound, but you can't afford more, you can get a great set of headphones for $300, much better than you can for a set of monitors. So in that example, spending more money, buying higher quality stuff matters. Plugins, not so much. Depends on what you're talking about. Okay, let's see. Still got 30 people here. You guys are crazy. Okay. Johnny says, I got to head to bed. It's like 1:15 in the morning. Johnny, thanks for stopping by, brother. And don't forget tomorrow night, right? Sunday, right, Johnny? You have your live stream. Make sure people go check that out over on his YouTube channel. James says, David, you are almost always using SSL channel strips. Nah, not true. Well, you've seen me do that. We've been on an SSL kick. But that's not true. If you go back and you watch a lot of my training courses and content, I use lots of channel strips, James. That I will tell you, yes. But in a lot of my courses, I use Neve a lot. I've used API. I've used TG12345. I have courses where I use all the Abbey Road channel strips, the red consoles. The SSL I've recently featured them more because there's more manufacturers that make the SSL. There's not many that make the Neve 88RS or the API Vision Strip. Universal Audio pretty much is it. The Abbey Road stuff pretty much waves. I know there's a few smaller companies that make things that they say are those things, but I'm talking about the major manufacturers. Most people tend to model the SSL, so I've been using that lately. However, I have all of those channel strips from all the different manufacturers, and I like them all for different reasons. So it actually, out of all of them, the SSL is not my favorite. By the way, I tend to like Neve better personally, but that's just a personal thing. Mike says, you are a great teacher, David. Hey, thanks, Mike. I appreciate that, brother. Freddie Samples. Hey, Freddie. I don't recognize that name. You might be new here too for the first time. If you are, welcome. Got to Stduio 1.2 Pro and still learning. Should I put a limiter on the post or the insert on the main audio prior to mix down? You could put it on, just put it last in the chain. Whether you put it last as the last insert or on the post, you could do either or. But welcome to the channel if you're new. Evan Ward says, the best thing you can do is have your own aesthetic. Then you can work on how to apply it. That's true. Absolutely true. Try to be unique as much as possible. And that takes time to develop your own aesthetic, your own style, your own vibe, your own flavor. Especially if you're at one point in your mixing journey, if you will, if you want to mix other people's music, especially if you want to try to, charge people to mix their music. Over time, people will come to you because you have a certain sound. People that hire me to mix their music is because my mixes sound a certain kind of way. It's people that want that analog kind of thing. That's why they hire me. Because I've kind of developed over all these years a little bit of a sound. Is it completely unique to anybody else in the world? No, of course not. But it's somewhat unique that if I mix a song and you mix a song, it's going to sound different. Remember, I used the word different, not better, right? So if a prospective client listen to one of your mix or my mix, they may hire you because they like the way your style of mixing is as opposed to mine. Doesn't mean that you're a better mixer than me or vice versa. It just means it's different. And when you have your own uniqueness to some degree, that will help you if you're trying to make a career out of this or even a part-time job out of this. That really helps, believe me. And all that comes with just time and practice, like anything else. Okay, let's see. David SJ says, okay, I need to go to work in my own studio. Thanks, David. Good night. Thank you so much for joining once again. I really do appreciate your support. Tool on the board says reference 4 is great. All my mixes are with headphones and my clients have no complaints. There you go. There you go. Let's see. HD 600 cans. Worth it? Yeah, I love them. Oh, I have the HD 700s, but I hear the HD 600s are great too. Freddie Sample says he's a first timer here. Hey, thanks. Good. Thanks. Welcome. Again, head over to homerecordingmadeeasy.com and get 5 free training courses. Go sign up. Doesn't cost you anything. You get $110 worth of free courses if you haven't done so already. And if you ever have any questions, you can always hit me up at the email address there. Let's make sure let's see. Freddie Samples. Is there a big difference in Stduio 1.3? Do I need it? Do you mean Stduio 1.4? Like, is there a difference between the versions 3 and 4, if that's what you mean? Depends on what you're doing. If you're doing mostly mixing, not really. If you're doing more song production, writing, and that kind of thing, there's a lot more feature sets and things that are in like Stduio 1.4 that might not have been in Stduio 1, 2.53. Most of what I do is more in the mixing end of things. It's not so much the production and MIDI and all that stuff. So I'm not the expert on that, but it depends on what you're doing. If you're doing mostly mixing and mastering, there's no real big difference between version 3, version 4 from that point of view. I think there's some additions in the mastering suite. So if you do a lot of mastering, you might find that the mastering package in version 4 heavily outweighs version 3. But I'm not sure about that, to be honest. Okay, let's see. What else we got? Some more questions coming in. Great. I heard the USB 4 and Thunderbolt may become universal and interchangeable in the future. Good news. Oh, God, I hope so. One thing I hate about another thing I really hated about this whole iMac Pro upgrade is that all the new ports are Thunderbolt 3. And on the 2013 Mac Pro, everything was Thunderbolt 2. And you can't plug. You have to use a dongle. You have to use the $30, no, excuse me, not $30, a $50 adapter to go from USB-C Thunderbolt 3 to compatible to a device that's Thunderbolt 2. I hate that, but that's just the way it is. So in this whole project, not only did I spend, an ungodly amount of money on an iMac Pro, which by the way, I love, worth every penny in my opinion. But then I spent $200 in adapters because I have 4 Thunderbolt 3 ports and I had to plug them into Thunderbolt 2 devices. So I had to get the $200 in dongles. Man, I wish they would make this stuff more universal. That's for sure. But, what are you going to do? Oh, man. Malta says, do you use a mic pre when recording bass, API Neve? Does it make a big difference? Well, it makes a big difference as compared to what? As compared to just plugging it into your interface, and then the question would be, well, what kind of interface are you using? And this is where when we're talking about some of the gear a little earlier, where sometimes you get a little bit what you pay for. Typically with a more bargain priced unit, a $99, $200 interface, you're going to get a set of preamps that are not as good as, say, buying a Presonus Quantum or a Universal Audio Apollo or something that's in the $1,000 range. The difference in the preamp is going to be different. So if you have a real inexpensive interface, would you benefit by getting a hardware preamp for your basics, for example? Yeah. Is it a big difference? No. Is it a huge audible difference? Again, it's subjective. For someone that's asking this kind of a question, which is a good question, by the way, is probably a little newer to the recording end of things, and that's why you're asking. And and it probably wouldn't make as much of a difference to you as you think that it should. What I mean by that is, I wouldn't plug a $1,000 preamp into a $99 interface. To me, that wouldn't make a whole lot of sense. I would use that money to buy a better interface. Now, once you have a really good interface or a good interface, and you like the way your bass sounds, why would you buy a Neve, an API preamp? For the same reason why you would have 4 different plug-in compressors as we use tonight, where you'll have an 1176, an LA2A, and a couple others, because they all sound a little bit different, but the differences are subtle. And so if you don't have, a good preamp for something like bass or guitar will make a little bit of a difference. It'll add that extra 10% maybe, but it's not a massive difference. It's not massive. Just like with these compressors, it's going to be subtle differences. So, I only say that because you said, does it make a big difference? And I want to tell you, it doesn't make a big difference, but does it make a subtle difference? Yes. It all depends on your budget, what you want to spend, and what interface are you plugging this thing into. You may find yourself better off buying a universal, and again, I'm just using this as an example because I have one, a Universal Audio Apollo, where you can use the Unison technology to record through the plugins. And now you can record through a Neve, an SSL, and API without having to buy the hardware units. It's one way to go. A lot more flexibility, great preamps, and you could do a lot more with them. That might be better suited than just buying, a $400 interface and then buying an external hardware preamp, if that makes sense. Hopefully that clears that up. Let's see. Freddie Sample says, song production mainly, lots of MIDI with synths. Oh, you were talking about the DAW differences in the versions. Yes, then in that case, going from version 3 to version 4 may make a big difference to you. The best thing to do is to probably go on the Presonus forums and ask that question for someone who does song production maybe the way you do and uses lots of MIDI and synths, and ask them about the different versions and the upgrade to see if it's worth it for you. I'm probably not the best person to ask, but that's where a lot of the differences in the versions lie, in those kind of features, from what I'm told. Let's see. Considering investing in a BAE 1073 DMP preamp, any thoughts? I've never used it, but I've heard they're great. And we just talked about preamps. Though BAE makes really good preamps, really good clones of the Neve stuff, and I've heard they're really good. I don't have one myself, so I couldn't tell you hands-on. But if you go to YouTube and do a bunch of searches, a lot of people have reviewed them and have said some great things about them. So I don't think you can go wrong with those. I'm sure they're a really good product, and they're affordable compared to a Neve. Barry, hey Barry, what's up? Dave, what didn't you like about the Stduio Live 32 as a control service, i.e. DAW control? Thanks. There was nothing about it I didn't like as far as the DAW control surface. What I didn't like about it was the fact it wasn't easily integratable with external hardware to do analog summing, which is a whole nother topic we're not going to spend on tonight, and that's the reason why I got rid of it. For my workflow, it didn't really work the way I was hoping it was going to. From a surface control standpoint, it was fine. Now, what I will tell you, if you don't have one yet, you may have one, and maybe that's why you're asking me. But if I was starting from scratch with Stduio 1 and wanted surface control, I wouldn't buy a Stduio Live. I would buy a fader port 16, unless you need all the inputs. Right? See, I didn't buy the Stduio Live originally for the inputs. I don't need 32 channels of input in my studio. I don't need more than really 8 channels of input in my studio. But at that time, there was no fader port 16. At that time, I don't even think the fader port 8 was out. So if you wanted to have all those faders in front of you, you needed to have a Stduio Live. Shortly thereafter, they came out with the fader port series. And now if I were to do it again, I would buy two fader port 16s, daisy chain them together, and you have your 32 channels of control. And from what I understand, the fader ports are a lot more fully featured as far as what it can control in Stduio 1 versus the Stduio Live. Now, I know the Stduio Live has had a bunch of firmware updates and some updates since I've sold mine, so the gap between those two products from a DAW control standpoint might be closing. I don't know. You got to go to the Presonus website and really do the research. But that's why I got rid of my Stduio Live 32. Stduio Live's a great mixer. It just didn't work in my workflow. David says, if you had one compressor to record through, what would it be? Ooh. One, because you mean for hardware, the one that would probably be the most universal. What would I do? 1176 probably. If I only could have one and it had to be hardware, probably the 1176 would be the most versatile one for what I would do. You know, they sound great on drums, they sound great on vocals, they sound great on guitar, they sound great on everything. Whereas, you know, like drums and snares and stuff, I wouldn't put an LA2A on that necessarily. So I would say an 1176 if I had to pick one. Again, if you ask me that question next week, I might give you a different answer, but off the top of my head, that would be the one I would use. Let's see. Mike says, hey, an 1176. There you go. Hey, I didn't even see that, Mike. See, great minds think alike. I don't know. Maybe, Davis, you were asking Mike. Maybe that's why. Well, I answered it for you anyway. Let's see. Mike says a lot of Jimmy Page's guitar sounds through an 1176 driven hard. I did not know that, and I'm a huge Led Zeppelin Jimmy Page fan. I didn't realize that. But it would make sense. Let's see. David says, I've been using the CLA 3A for everything. Just wondering what would be better, if anything. I might try the 1176 to see what the difference is. Well, here's the thing. Where you get back into styles of compressor, the CLA 3A, the LA 3A and the 1176 are both FET style compressors. The CLA 3A looks like an LA 2A as far as the controls. It's a more simplistic compressor in the way it's used. You don't have the same control over attack, release, and ratio. They sound a little bit different, but they sound very similar. Okay, those two sound similar. Because they're FET style compressors. But try both. On electric guitars, I use LA3As all the time, and I like the way they sound. But then again, I also use 1176s from time to time. But you're going to find that those two compressors sound similar to each other, more so than, let's say, a Fairchild in 1176 or an LA2A in 1176. There'll be more of a noticeable difference, I think. But you should experiment. Okay. Any other questions? Still got 28 people here. We've been going almost 2 hours, which is really cool. Hey, the stream worked out pretty good tonight, right? Stream worked out pretty good. Again, once again, if you don't remember, again, I'll put it up on the screen again. There's mixing with analog style plugins made easy on sale. The live mixing series of the song we worked on tonight, again, on sale 50% off. Sunday is the last day of that sale. Then it goes back to $49.95. It's on sale this weekend for $24.95 or $24. I forget what we put it at. Again, there are coupon codes for both. You'll see the ones coming up on the screen for mixing with analog style plugins. And the coupon code for the live mixing series is LMS50. So for all you first timers that are here tonight, go to Home Recording Made Easy. Make sure you get your 5 free mixing courses right on the homepage, and that will put you on my email list where you'll get these coupon codes and you'll get all these discounts. Most of that stuff is not made. I don't make it to the general public. Every now and again, I'll throw it on my Facebook group for anybody that wants to use it. But it's really more for the people that are on my email list. I try to give those deals to you guys only. So it's important that you're on that email list. So I hope that all makes sense for you. Oh, I see the stream is buffering a little bit now, which is kind of strange. Hopefully that will stop soon. Let's see. So what we're going to do now, we're here about 2 hours. People are starting to take off. Everyone's saying, as usual, great show. Thank you so much again. Again, next week, I'm not sure if it'll be Friday night or Saturday night. Probably Saturday night. We'll do this again. We'll continue on with this song. We'll add a few more finishing touches to it. Once again, make sure you check out the websites, Home Recording Made Easy, mixingmadeeasy.net. Go check out what I have going on. Please like and share this video. This will be up on the YouTube channel so you can watch it again later if you came in late. And I will see you guys all next week. So thank you so much once again, everybody, for your support, and take care.